What does privacy mean to you? If you're watching this, you're an internet-connected person. You generate a lot of data. Just by interacting with a website or using a smartphone or scanning a rewards card, you're generating data. Maybe you post on social media, text, audio, video, it doesn't matter. You're generating data. Then there's the information that you generate just by going about your everyday business. Make a purchase, you're generating data. Take out a loan, you're generating data. Pay your bills, you're generating data. Go to the doctor, you're generating data. Move, you're generating data. And in the world that we live in, and that we will live in, which is increasingly a smart, connected city, data is money. All sorts of entities collect data and try to leverage it. As Edward Snowden showed, our governments are collecting information on us all the time. These include law enforcement and intelligence operatives. Apart from governments, private companies collect a tremendous amount of information about us and on other competitors. Predicting consumer demands is big money, and we provide a lot of information to companies about what we do all day long. Think about the free services that you use. Wi-Fi, email, social media, apps, software, content. It costs money to produce and host all of that stuff. And your data is what pays the bills. And most people don't think too much about the implications of giving up that data. Be honest, how closely do you read those terms and conditions? When was the last time you read the terms and conditions of that free Wi-Fi you logged into the airport? Okay, I'm talking about pre-COVID time. Facebook, the rewards program you signed up for at the liquor store. Now I'm talking about post-COVID times. Admit it, you got bored after the second line and scrolled to the bottom and just clicked accept. Sometimes we surrender that information as a matter of existing, and we don't even have terms and conditions to read and opt into or out of. This is particularly concerning when you think about the amount of financial, health, and other personal data that you generate and don't control. When companies hire us, some do background checks and engage in open source intelligence just to investigate our behaviors. Who really wants an employee who whines about their classes publicly or who posts photos of themselves doing stupid or illegal activities? Those are signs of an employee who might be a pain in the ass or who might not exercise good discretion. What skeletons are in your closet should an employer look? Maybe you've posted a photo of you punching a cone or posing provocatively in a racy outfit. Or maybe you posted a comment about your lecturer or somebody famous that's derogatory or off color. Maybe you posted something profane or obscene. We've all done dumb stuff, and sometimes that stuff that we do today can paint us in the future as stupid. It might cost us a job opportunity, and that's not the worst case scenario. Sometimes our recorded behavior may implicate us in a crime and cost us our freedom or our life. Don't believe me? In 2020, a man in Nigeria was sentenced to die over a recording of him blaspheming over WhatsApp. Going back to thinking about companies' desires for data, they also try to learn about each other. They watch their competitors' products because they want to know how we interact with them and the types of things that might make us switch from a competitor to using their product. Obviously, staying ahead of the curve is important if a business is to continue trading and to continue a loyal customer base. Also in the hunt for our data are other individuals. Maybe these are people trying to understand whether we are who we say we are. And that's okay. But what happens if those individuals are criminal actors? Maybe trying to learn about us to manipulate us, or to use our data to engage in criminal activities without our knowledge. The bottom line is that our data is our data, and regardless of what it is, we need to worry about what happens to it once it's put on the internet. Because there are consequences, particularly when we lose the ability to consent on how it's used or accessed. When we consider all of the entities that are after our data, we can see that desiring privacy is not a question of being able to hide bad behavior from the light of day. No, wanting privacy does not indicate that a person is necessarily engaging in deviant behavior, and it shouldn't be construed as such. We should demand privacy to protect our personal business, our personal data, our intellectual property, and our secrets that we don't want to reveal to the world without our permission. Let me field the inevitable what kind of secrets need to be secret if those behaviors aren't illegal question. There are tons of everyday and maybe not so everyday things that we'd rather the world not know. And I've covered several already, but just to put a button on this, let's think of some of the following scenarios. Maybe you or your partner had an abortion. Maybe you have a kid and that kid did something super weird with an internet-connected toy that you bought them. Perhaps you just said something silly and inappropriate and you would rather forget about that episode. Maybe you got sick and you have a sexually transmitted disease. Maybe you had sex. Generally, none of these things are wrong, but all of those things are probably things that you would rather keep private. In Australian society and elsewhere in the world, there are still lots of licit acts that are stigmatized. And should they become public knowledge, those acts could be damaging to the reputation of the people involved. So who is supposed to protect our privacy? Is it the state? After all, like we said before in this class, the state is supposed to offer us protection. Surely, our data security is part of our overall security. So to that end, are there laws designed to protect our privacy? The answer is sometimes, and when it's true, kind of. And to make matters more complicated, whether the state does anything or can do anything about a privacy breach is another can of worms altogether. The question of regulating privacy is a question that goes to the heart of what privacy actually is. In one sense, if we have to rely on laws to protect our privacy, we don't have privacy. Systems, not policies, are better indicators of whether or not privacy is going to be available in a certain set of circumstances. But regulations are important to ensure that companies and other entities that we entrust with our data, particularly when we don't have an option of giving them that data, such as our credit scores or our health records, don't abuse that trust and implement good systems to protect that data, particularly when we start seeing things like smart toasters and internet-connected baby monitors that we willingly bring into our homes and that connect to companies that we don't necessarily engage with on a daily basis, but we have to entrust when we buy their products. These are items that may provide inadvertent windows for outsiders to spy on us. Now, regulation always has limitations, for instance, jurisdiction. In an internet-connected world, it's very difficult for governments to control how companies not based in their jurisdiction behave. Along with government regulation are invariable questions regarding protection. At what point do we cede liberty for security? And whose responsibility is it to ensure that guardians of information keep that information safe and are held accountable when they fail? Those aren't easy questions to answer, in part because when it comes to accountability, the little guy, that is people like you and me, are disproportionately held responsible. What do I mean by that? If you or I make a mistake that is a violation of the law, even if it's inadvertent, chances are we will be held accountable. But if a big company screws up, such as Equifax did when attackers breached its system and stole data from millions of people in part to Equifax's negligence, it faces little accountability in terms of criminal sanction. At worst, it faces a financial penalty, though many times not even that happens. Ultimately, regulation of privacy comes down to a question of trust, and in many cases, whether we trust an entity and for how long, say indefinitely, in the future, are not necessarily congruent answers. Think simply about change. How much do we trust that our governmental institutions will act in our best interests throughout our lifetimes? For some of you, you may have a high sense of trust. Others, particularly those of you who are immigrants or people of color, will have less trust because you've already been subjected or personally know someone who has been subjected to the good intentions of the state and the laws that the people in powers make. The increase in the surveillance capacities of smart cities is concerning to folks who have not historically been able to trust the state. So, if the law isn't enough to protect the data that we produce, what do? We need to think about our operational security. And by we, I'm talking about people in different types of organizational settings. At a high level, we think of companies and governments that seek to protect data within their ecosystems. For instance, government employees may be required to use dongles to log into sensitive platforms and to cycle their passwords on regular intervals. This includes employees who might be doing things which aren't so sensitive, like school teachers working for the Department of Defense in a base, say, in Belgium. Those passwords might be required to have a degree of randomization or to contain a diverse array of character types. Operational security might also include detaching certain systems from the internet, making them less likely to be breached by external actors. Organizations may restrict employees from using certain software or engaging with certain parts of the internet on work-connected computers. Organizations may control employees' updates on their computers to ensure that everything is up to spec. These types of protection mechanisms work when you have large economies of scale. You have teams specialized in assessing risk and vulnerabilities and engaging in that work on a regular basis so everyone else can go about doing their jobs. But all of this is well and good to keep businesses afloat and insulated against data exfiltration or unwanted penetration. But what about everyday people? We don't have teams of people making sure that everything that we do and that we use is secure. We don't have those economies of scale to protect ourselves in the same way. That's why it's important for us to understand our own vulnerabilities, particularly the ones that we opt into. We need to have a good understanding of best practice in terms of securing our data and sharing our data, making sure that our computers have virus protection, making sure that we cycle our passwords and we use unique passwords for the different accounts that we might have. We need to be aware of where our data is and who can access it. We need to understand that as internet-connected people, our ability to protect ourselves and protect our privacy is always going to be limited. The information that we share on social media isn't private, even when our privacy settings, quote unquote, are high. Let me use the example of an anonymous troll. Now, a lot of these trolls think that they can say whatever they want and do whatever they want on the internet, saying mean things, making threats, and nobody is going to be any the wiser. But the truth is that somebody who is motivated can often figure out the identity of a troll. For a great example, have a look at the work of Emily Gorsinski in the article linked below. She has spent a lot of her time identifying people who spew hate and make threats via anonymous avatars on the internet. We need to have an idea of the risks our actions place us in, even when we're not behaving badly, and we need to be aware of what those risks are. You know how old heads talk about the dumb shit they used to do back in the day when they were younger, except there was nobody there recording it? Yeah. Those days are the past, and people today need to think that whatever they do will result in them being recorded. And more recently, as we become globalized people and we travel for work or for leisure, we need to have a good idea of the rights that we have or don't have as we cross international borders. That's where border patrols, such as in the United States and in Australia, may coerce you to opening up your phone and sharing its contents. You don't enjoy the rights that you might enjoy at home. Those rights don't necessarily travel with you. You might find yourself in liminal spaces where even if you're a citizen of those countries, the rights that you have outside of the airport, away from the border, don't apply to you. And while those prospects require some thinking and reflection for each person's personal circumstances, there are things that we can do to make sure that our digital hygiene is good, such as using a password manager that randomly generates passwords, backing up our data so that you can restore it later, using encrypted apps to communicate, that's apps like Telegram, Wickr, or even WhatsApp, and doing whatever else that you can in order to normalize privacy. That's all for today. Ta-ta for now.